Barely Research Facts is a fact-based podcast brought to you by ArtNowThus, an experiential arts agency based out of Mumbai. Each episode, we pick a word at random, dive into it, and see what it brings to us. We are your hosts. My name is Ragini, and this is Shar. Let's go. Okay, hello and welcome to the pilot episode of Barely Research Facts. Our word for today is pepper.
Pepper.
Woohoo!
Oh, I really like this one. I mean, there were a lot of interesting things around just pepper, its production, its history, and all of that. And I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, so start.
Shall we start with just a tiny bit of history?
Okay.
And something that's a point of pride is that the first thing that pops out in the history of pepper is its origin, and it's India, Ragini. It originated in India.
Okay. Well done, us.
Yes, well done, us. Let's bask in someone else's limelight.
Yeah.
But yeah, so pepper is native to Kerala, which is in India, which is where I'm from.
Yes.
It was, archaeological evidence has known to show that it's been used at least from 2000 BC in India. And not only did we realize that it was amazing, but also that other people would think the same. So we've been exporting it as well for a long time.
Do you like pepper as a flavor? I would like to get that out of the way.
Yes.
Yeah? I'm not sure how I feel about pepper as a flavor.
Really?
I mean, I know other people like it. Yeah, I feel like I don't have a great attachment to the flavor of pepper.
Okay, noted.
Okay. Moving on.
I mean, I don't think there's something amazing about just the smell of freshly ground pepper. In fact, I brought my mortar and pestle from India. I used a kilo of my baggage allowance to bring a mortar and pestle from India that I bought like for 100 rupees.
Well done.
Yeah.
Your mother will be very proud of how much you're holding on to your roots.
Yes. So, back to the history of pepper. India used to be a big exporter, and in fact, India is still one of the largest, if not the largest exporter. Brazil is a close second right now. And interestingly, the largest importer is the US. They had a really big craze, especially during the latter half of the 20th century when exotic, quote unquote, exotic recipes required the use of pepper. So now they've become the world's largest importer. Now, rewinding a little bit.
Yes.
Not a little bit, quite a bit. To 2000 BC, the reason that we know that there was trade was because there was signs of a pepper trade from India to Egypt that was found out because they found peppercorns stuffed into the nostrils of Ramses the Great. And he lived between 1303 and 1213 BC.
Wow. And why
So
did,
they found-
why did
yeah,
they stuff it? Oh, in the mummification process. Like, because he was
Yes,
buried
yeah.
with it. Oh. Yeah, I do know that pepper was considered a luxury item also for a very long time. So I understand why having peppercorn stuffed
Why it
in
was
your
up
nose.
there.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because the mummifier was like, I
Mummifier.
kind of don't like him. So,
Here, take 2 peppercorns.
as a final rebellion, I'm just going to do this. So by 40 AD, the Romans had a thriving trade in spices. And obviously pepper was a big part of that, among other things like cinnamon and incense oils. And I can imagine, though, people who had never seen or smelled these amazing smells before going through a market and just being enthralled by all these things they'd never experienced. And it would have been a point of pride to have pepper at your table. So it was common practice to bring pepper in a mortar or pestle and grind it at the table as a show of your wealth, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. They used it in a lot of the recipes. They incorporated it into the flavors of all the recipes that they did. And this is, bear in mind, this is like 25 to 79 AD, like that range of time. Interestingly, just a little story about the Romans. They were attacked in 410 AD and they were attacked by the Visigoths. And to lift the siege of the Visigoths and prevent the city from being sacked, along with other luxurious items like gold, silver, silk, and stuff like that, leathers, they paid 3,000 pounds of pepper. They offered to pay 3,000 pounds of pepper.
Wow.
And unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. So the siege was resumed and eventually the Eternal City was sacked. And that's an interesting little point in history where something so innocuous and small made it into such a big negotiation, because it sort of led to the fall of Rome's imperial power later.
Wow.
And once that stopped, obviously someone has to, take up the mantle of middleman exporter of pepper from India, because the Indians, or the people who lived on the Indian subcontinent at the time, didn't really seem to want to travel very far to trade their own pepper. They were happy to sell, but the Arabs were then organized into a dominant force in the trade of pepper.
Yeah, the Arabs did become middlemen, and they took on the mantle quite proudly and quite profitably. But basically, and so one of the reasons why pepper was always this luxury item was because, of course, it wasn't available anywhere else. And it continued to be that way for a very long time because you just had so many middlemen involved in the exporting of pepper anywhere. And Indians were completely ignorant about anything that was going on in Europe. Europeans were very happy to reciprocate that ignorance. And so the Arabs took on this wonderful role. And one of the ways that they kind of protected the trade route, I found this really amusing, but was to tell the Europeans that peppercorn, grew on this tree. So it wasn't the growing of the pepper that was the problem, but the tree was guarded by poisonous snakes. Okay, and so what they had to do to get the pepper was they had to burn down the pepper tree so that they could kill the snakes. And that's how the pepper would get shriveled and would take on that black shriveled texture that we see in peppercorns today. And then, I mean, of course, people were playing all their lives to get the peppercorn, but also, then you had to replant the tree, which was a lot of work. And so they would charge, like they had this story and people were just lapping it up. And that's why they could charge the prices that they did. In actuality, the peppercorn plant is a vine and it turns black and shriveled when you place it in the sun. So it has nothing to do with poisonous snakes. But the Arabs they were quite innovative and
good storytellers.
Creative in how they came up with this. And so apparently they were also experts cinnamon. And how they got cinnamon was that cinnamon was a plant that only grew on very high mountain tops. And there was a particular bird that would make its nest out of cinnamon sticks. So they had to send bigger birds flying with large pieces of meat so that the bird would take the meat and put it in his nest. And then the nest would fall, and that's how they would go and get cinnamon. I don't know a lot about how cinnamon is made or grown, but I imagine this is probably not the right story.
I think I'm going to go with it as the real one. This is why
I think
they were successful.
Just for how wonderfully creative it is. But anyway, so the Arabs continued to be middlemen for a while, and then slowly Europe grew quite tired of these incredibly high prices. So they started organizing expeditions to come to the source. But regardless of whatever was going on, for up to this point, pepper still stayed just exorbitantly expensive and was a luxury item that was only consumable by people with a certain amount of wealth.
So interestingly, pepper was so luxurious and so expensive that I found this little anecdote that was really interesting. Did you know that there was a guild of pepperers that was established in the 12th century, in the early 12th century in the UK? And they were responsible for maintaining standards for the purity of spices and for the setting of certain weights and measures. So they were responsible for other spices as well. But yeah, there was a guild of pepperers. And I did try and look them up.
That's a cute name.
It is. I would have loved to have been a pepperer. Like walk into a room and act all cool because I'm part of the guild.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Ragini. I'm a pepperer.
In fact, pepper was so expensive that it was often accepted in lieu of money. And not just for small things like, oh, Jeff, here's a handful of pepper and you can have my goat. No, for things like dowries, taxes, rent.
Ooh.
And what's funny is there's a particular term that's survived, all the eons. and it's called the Peppercorn Rent. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean what it used to back then, but the phrase remains. The Peppercorn Rent these days, it just means a small payment. And I think it probably evolved as the use of pepper sort of ceased to be for dowries and rent and things. It became smaller. But at the time, the Peppercorn Rent, it was, the phrase was used to support the story that pepper was expensive and could be used in lieu of money. And in fact, in Germany, there's records of like whole towns paying rent with peppercorns.
Wow.
Yeah. Fun fact, during the Middle Ages, especially in the Renaissance period, pepper was associated with melancholy. And you know about the humours, the different humours?
Yeah.
Pepper was associated with melancholy. Though, soon after, pepper was used extensively in French cuisine. And French cuisine at the time, even then, was a cut above the rest. And so its use in especially Western cuisine grew more because really elite types of food were using pepper, and so you'd just use it in like, it goes in my omelette. I heard people in France do it.
Anyway, but as pepper got really popular in Europe and expeditions began to the east to sort of discover pepper for themselves, and this is when you had Vasco da Gama landing in India, you had Christopher Columbus in the exact opposite direction going towards West Indies instead. So there's a really cool story about how, Christopher Columbus discovered. I mean, I just realized that Christopher Columbus got a lot of things, like there are lots of things that have just endured, but they're just completely things that he just completely got wrong. So he basically landed in West Indies and he was on a mission to find the pepper plant and bring back his cargo full of pepper. But what he did find was not the peppercorn plant, but he found pepper, as in chilies, growing. Mm-hmm. All right. And then, and he mistook it for being the peppercorn plant. And he tasted the food. And once he could taste the heat in the food, he was quite convinced that this is it, that this is what I found. And so he loaded up his ship with a ton of chilies instead of pepper and brought it back. But what that did was, so while then, pepper, as in the chili, got popular in Spain and in areas around, the misnomer has sort of lasted where in the West, even now, pepper is not just a peppercorn. Yeah, chili pepper is a thing. Mm-hmm. And so basically anything to do with that kind of heat or any kind of food that gives out a bit of heat or has a really sharp flavor to it has, so even peppermint, for example, even though it has a menthol quality to it, so the mint got added there, but the word pepper and peppermint comes from the fact that there is a little bit of a sharp flavor.
Oh, that's interesting. Peppermint. Oh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Anyway, and after that, and so basically then you had trade routes established from the west to the east. There was a heavy trade of spices, but despite the fact that now they had direct access and the Arab middlemen had lost their clout, despite the fact that they had access, it was just such a long route to get it from India to the west that pepper still stayed prohibitively expensive for a very long time until such time that, they were able to just bring the plant itself over to countries other than India.
Okay.
Which was about with the advent of the British East India Company and about not too long ago. So from 2000 BC till almost the middle of the 19th century, pepper was a luxury item and was prohibitively expensive to consume.
Wow.
And in all of this, let's note that Indians were getting none of this money. None of that was coming to us.
Bless them. They just wanted to make the pepper, okay? They just wanted to make it and send it everywhere.
Okay.
Are you interested in puns, Ragini?
Yes, I am. So exciting.
Here, let me tell you a couple of bad ones.
Okay. I love that.
What do cops use pepper spray for? Assault.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's a list of them. I was trying
to go for something like harassed. Anyway, okay, next.
Okay. In your list of professions, joke maker, just cross that one out. did you hear about the bell pepper flavored vodka?
It was...
It makes you belligerent.
Oh my God.
Belligerent.
Yeah, I got it. Oh my God.
So do you mean to say the constant repetition of a punchline doesn't make it funnier? What do you mean?
Okay, yeah.
There was some really bad ones, but I'm not going to torture you with those.
Thank you.
I will end on a really good one. Okay. Not to set expectations really high, but how do you check the weight of a red hot chili pepper?
You Californicated? I don't know.
You give it away now.
Oh my God!
I mean, it's the cheap thrills in life that get me, really.
I think I did well with Californicate, though.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Yeah, well done. Okay, joke maker is back on the list.
Okay, so do you know anything about the production of pepper, or like what the pepper plant looks like and things like that?
I know the plant is a vine.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a tree, and it sometimes can have snakes next to it, but it's not like a, dangerous escapade, as some people used to think. So the black pepper comes from a shrub, and it's classified as Piper nigrum, and it's only one of 1,000 species in that genus, in the Piper genus. And that Piper genus is the larger family of peppers and called Piperaceae. Now, if I'm pronouncing this wrong, I'm really sorry. You might have to excuse me for that. But I didn't know that there were so many species, and it was Piper nigrum that black and white pepper is derived from. They're all sort of small shrubby-like things or vines, especially in the tropical and subtropical regions of the world. They're like vines. And the pepper shrub, it's a climber. And that's why you see it grown in conjunction with other things in India. You'll see it on coffee plantations and things like that, especially because it's...
Oh.
Yeah, it needs warm subtropical climates, but it doesn't need direct sunlight. So it's usually grown in the shade in coffee plantations. It's like a symbiotic thing. So there are lots of these plantations near Bangalore, where I used to live. A tenuous connection, but it's there.
Yes.
And they grow quite long. They're tall, I should say, 30 feet. And it's all aerial roots.
Ah.
They can grow to 30 feet.
Oh, like the banyan tree.
Yes, aerial roots like a banyan tree. The only two things I knew that had aerial roots was the orchid and a banyan tree. So it grew to about 30 feet if you left it unpruned, but usually if it's commercially cultivated, they keep it to about 12 feet. I'm assuming so that it's easier to harvest. So they have berry-like fruits, and that's what become the peppercorns once they are dried. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about the plant and about how it's grown in conjunction with coffee and tea. So I thought that was an interesting little addition.
Yeah, and so the heat of the peppercorn, the sensation of heat comes from a resin called Capsaicin in the peppercorn. And Capsaicin and peppercorns themselves are also the source of other heat-generating substances, including an alkaloid called piperine, which is used to create the pungent effect in a brandy. There is also an oil that is distilled from peppercorns that is used in meat sauces to give it a slightly more smoky, heaty flavor.
Oh.
And that's one. But however, this is what I actually found really interesting. The pepper heat in a chili pepper comes from a substance called capsaicin. All right. And now what the capsaicin does is basically it tricks your brain so it combines with a receptor in your brain that is associated with the sensation of heat. So it signals heat to your brain. And which is why when you eat anything that contains capsaicin, there is a sense of burning, even though there is nothing actually physically being burned, because your brain is being tricked into it. However, in cases where you use pure capsaicin extract, and so the sensation is extremely severe, even though, once again, you're not actually physically being burned, it can trick your mind into it so deeply that your body will actually have a response to the burning. So you might have an ulcer, you might have a small burn mark, and basically, your mind makes it real. So it's not actually happening, but it's just being tricked to a place where the body responds to it like it is actually being burned. I thought that was kind of cool.
Wow, that's insane. I mean, obviously, I don't mind chili, but I think pure capsaicin might push me over the edge.
Yeah.
Just another interesting thing. When I moved to the UK first, I had to stop saying capsicum because nobody says that here. Unfortunately, just one of the many things I had to change. But they call them bell peppers. So bell, cayenne, and chili peppers are not obviously members of the piper genus, as pepper is. They're classified with the Solanacea family, and they're commonly known as nightshades. And there's another 2,000 species. That nightshade family is like indigenous to Central and South America. So it's so interesting that they semantically have very similar names, but they have nothing else in common. Yeah. Not even where they are indigenous to.
We can thank Christopher Columbus for that.
Yep.
But, by the way, so you have green, red, orange, yellow bell peppers, right?
Yes, yeah.
But I also found out that apparently you have purple bell peppers.
What?
That actually looks a lot like a bengan or an eggplant, honestly. Like, I thought it was much more exotic when I first read up on it, and then I Googled it to see an image, and I was like... But it's ridiculously expensive, and it looks wonderful in salads, is the use that I have seen for a purple bell pepper.
Does it taste the exact same? I mean, I know you're not an expert, but I feel like I need to ask questions.
I don't know. I guess the flavor is like slightly different. Like it would be like a green bell pepper tastes slightly different from a red bell pepper. And there is it ripens to a certain degree. So the flavor changes. But I guess the flavor might be slightly different. But I think the pure functionality of a purple bell pepper is that it just looks pretty cool. Yeah. So we can just replace that mortar and pestle and peppercorn on the table to keeping a couple of purple bell peppers on the table, and we welcome you into the 21st century.
I'm not going to lie, I'm going to look for purple bell peppers and see.
And put them on your table and then call people over. And
yep.
Look. Yeah. Send me a picture when you do that. And now for our final segment. I'm very excited about this one. Come on, Sharon.
What's funny is I haven't even seen all the Avengers movies, and I'm the one telling this little factlet. But when we first decided that we wanted to do this word, the first thing that popped into my mind in pop culture was pepper pots. So for today's pop culture segment,
yay!
Pop culture! I have decided... Usually we make joint decisions, but I've decided this is going to be the intro for our pop culture segment, is me singing unmelodically pop culture. Moving on. Pepper pots. I think if you're familiar with the Avengers, then you've probably heard of Pepper Potts. She is Iron Man, Tony Stark's assistant, and by Gwyneth Paltrow.
And his wife. Eventually.
Oh, I keep forgetting that she is married to me. But this story was interesting. Her name is Virginia Potts, and she used to work in the Stark Industries. She was working there in like the financial department, something small. And one day she discovered, obviously in true comic fashion, she discovered something huge, a problem that she wanted to go and speak to Tony Stark about. And she was accosted by his bodyguard outside his office. And he ended up spraying her in the face with pepper spray because she tried to get into Tony Stark's office. And that's why he calls her Pepper. That's how she got her name, Pepper.
Oh, and so Virginia Potts became Pepper Potts, and that's how...
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's an incident I would have wanted to be reminded of continuously if I married the guy eventually.
That's the kind of guy Tony Stark is, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So clearly we are Avengers enthusiasts, and we know a lot about this.
Yeah, I mean, send us your Avengers queries at our Instagram. No problem, I'll answer them.
Okay, and with that, we come to the end of this episode. We will see you next time.
We hope you had fun. See you.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening in. Our episode this week was edited by Payal Rathore. Music for the episode is by Charita Arora. If you like the episode, if you have any feedback about the episode, or if you'd like to suggest a word that we could explore, write into us. We would love to hear from you. We're on Instagram at Barely Research Facts. You could also reach out to us on our website at www.artnowthus.in. We'll see you next time.